In the year 33 AD, a transformative event unfolded on a stark, rocky outcrop beyond Jerusalem's walls, a place grimly named Golgotha, the Hill of the Skull. The air hung heavy with dust and sorrow, and a diverse crowd converged. Roman legionaries with steely gazes, Jewish elders cloaked in stern authority, passers-by drawn by whispers of drama, and a small, steadfast group of Jesus' disciples, their faces etched with grief. The atmosphere buzzed with an electric tension, as if the very stones beneath their feet sensed the magnitude of what was to come, a divine intervention that would forever alter the trajectory of human existence. Jesus of Nazareth, condemned to the torturous death of crucifixion, was led up the jagged path to Golgotha's summit. Crucifixion was a calculated act of cruelty, a spectacle designed to degrade and deter, a message from Rome that rebellion would be crushed without mercy. Yet for Jesus, this was no surrender, but the threshold of a sacred mission. The crude wooden beam he bore, rough-hewn and stained with the suffering of others, was both an emblem of oppression and a vessel of divine purpose. Many among the onlookers had yearned for a champion to break Rome's yoke, but Jesus' kingdom transcended earthly power. His fight was against the invisible chains of sin and mortality that bound every heart. For centuries, the Jewish people had held fast to prophecies of a Messiah, a God-sent Redeemer who would heal the rift between humanity and its Creator. Ancient scriptures painted visions of deliverance, yet none had envisioned salvation arriving through such a brutal public execution. As Jesus was raised upon the cross, iron spikes driven through his flesh, the crowd's responses fractured. Some taunted him, their voices sharp with scorn. "If you're God's chosen, free yourself from that cross." The temple leaders, who had maneuvered his downfall, stood with grim triumph, certain they had extinguished a dangerous voice. But for those who had walked with Jesus, the sight of their teacher in agony was a wound to the soul. In the midst of his suffering, Jesus spoke, his words a beacon of mercy. "Father, pardon them, for they are blind to their deeds." This utterance, born of compassion amid excruciating pain, struck the hearts of those who heard it, a glimpse of a love that defied comprehension. Few realized they were witnessing the realization of ancient promises, the moment when the Savior would offer himself as a ransom for the world. As Jesus endured the cross, an unsettling shift began to unfold. The sun, high in the noonday sky, was overtaken by a deepening shadow. For 3 hours, an impenetrable darkness cloaked Golgotha, stilling the crowd's murmurs and igniting whispers of dread. This was no fleeting astronomical quirk, no ordinary eclipse. It was a celestial proclamation, a moment when the cosmos itself seemed to bow in awe. Long ago, the prophet Amos had foretold such a sign. "I will make the sun vanish at midday and shroud the earth in darkness." Amos 8:9. Now, those cryptic words took form, a testament that forces beyond human reckoning were at work. This darkness was not merely a dimming of light, it carried profound spiritual weight. While Jesus bore the physical torment, the spikes, the thorns, the labored breaths, his deeper anguish was unseen. He was shouldering the collective guilt of humanity, every transgression from the first to the last. The suffocating blackness that enveloped the hill reflected this burden, a visible emblem of the divide sin carves between humanity and God. Jesus, untainted by sin, became the sacrificial offering, absorbing the curse that had plagued creation since its earliest days. For the people of Israel, this darkness was a stark symbol of divine reckoning. The sacred texts had long tied darkness to God's judgment, as in Joel's prophecy. "The sun and moon will fade, and the stars will withhold their light." Joel chapter 2, verse 31. As Jesus took on the world's iniquity, it was as if God veiled the radiance of his creation, allowing the sun to retreat as a marker of the seismic shift underway. The earth seemed to shudder under the weight of sin's consequences, and the heavens mourned the ordeal of the one who was both divine and human. Yet the darkness was not the final chapter. After 3 hours of unrelenting torment, Jesus' voice rang out, resolute and victorious. It is complete. With those words, he declared the debt of sin fully paid. At that instant, the ground quaked, and the thick curtain in the temple, guarding the holiest of spaces, split from top to bottom. This was no random event. It signified that the separation between God and humanity had been dismantled. Through Jesus' offering, the path to God's presence was thrown open to all. As the darkness began to recede, the heavy silence that had gripped the land lifted, giving way to a new dawn. The return of light was more than a natural restoration. It was a symbol of the hope and triumph Jesus' sacrifice had secured. His death had shattered the dominion of sin, breaking the curse that had shadowed humanity for ages. The brilliance of God's grace now shone forth, offering reconciliation and renewal to all who would receive it. For many at Golgotha, the events left them reeling in confusion and mourning. The elders, who had orchestrated Jesus' condemnation, could not grasp that his death was the very act of divine compassion they had resisted. The soldiers, who had jeered at him, and the crowds, who had clamored for his execution, would soon sense that this was not the end, but the birth of a new promise. Jesus' death was a conquest. The moment when the power of sin and death was undone for all who would trust in him. The darkness at Golgotha was far more than a celestial anomaly. It was a profound spiritual reality. It illuminated the judgment of sin, the estrangement it fosters, and the staggering cost of redemption. In those hours of shadow, Jesus bore the ultimate penalty, exclusion from God's presence. His cry, "My God, why have you left me?" Matthew 27:46, revealed the depth of this isolation. For the first time in eternity, the bond between Father and Son was strained as Jesus carried humanity's guilt. Yet this sacrifice was the bridge to restoration, dismantling the wall sin had built. The darkness also hinted at Jesus' journey beyond the cross. In the hours following his death, he descended into the realm of the departed, releasing the faithful who had been held apart from God since humanity's fall. Before his sacrifice, the righteous awaited in a state of separation. Jesus' death flung wide the gates of heaven, ushering them into eternal unity with their Maker. For those gathered at the cross, the darkness was a moment of confrontation, a call to face the gravity of sin and the immensity of redemption. The Apostle Paul would later proclaim, "God made the sinless one to bear our sin, so that through him we might embody God's righteousness." 2 Corinthians 5:21. Jesus endured the penalty we owed, facing the darkness so that we could abide in the light of his mercy. The darkness of Golgotha endures as a potent reminder of sin's toll and God's boundless love. It compels us to reflect. Are we dwelling in the radiance of Christ's forgiveness, or are we still lost in sin's gloom? The darkness was momentary, but the light of Jesus' sacrifice is everlasting. His death cleared the way for us to return to God, to be forgiven, restored, and made new. This is more than a chronicle of a bygone era. It is a living summons. Jesus bore the world's sins to mend our bond with God. The darkness of his death was a sign of judgment, but it also heralded the hope and liberation his sacrifice won. For those wandering in the shadows of sin, despair, or emptiness, the truth resounds. Christ's light is within reach. Through his death, Jesus carved a path back to the embrace of our Creator. The veil of the cross has lifted, and the light of Christ shines without end.